And welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast with my partner Brian Siegler. I am Curtis Wilson, and this episode is presented by Dr. Lord Jeremy Counts at the Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg. If you love this podcast, the Hokies, the town of Blacksburg, make sure you are supporting Main Street Pharmacy whenever you make your way to town.
Whether you need prescriptions, a tube of toothpaste, or just want to stop to say hello, let Jeremy and his team take care of you. The money you spend at Main Street Pharmacy goes towards the things you love and support. So next time you're in Blacksburg, head down to 301 South Main Street and tell them Curtis and Brian sent you. Buddy, we are back after a 3-week hiatus. I swear it did not take me 3 weeks to work off that hangover.
You sure?
I swear.
Happy New Year, first of all, man. Hey, you know what? You go out with a bang every year, right?
Yeah, that was definitely a bang.
We go out with a bang every year with that episode. It's a lot of fun. You get to unload a lot of grievances. You get to say things normally we may not say, things we may not do. But, shout out Tally and Jeremy for coming on. It was a blast. If you have not listened to that episode, please do go back and listen to that because it was an entertaining 2 hours. If you watched live, which a lot of people did, like LeVar joined us in here that night. It was a lot of fun, man. Now, one brief caveat before we get going tonight. Our buddy Robbie Compton, who was going to join us, is not able to. Wifey a little under the weather, and he's having to do some doctoring on her tonight.
Yeah. We got the word about 2 hours ago. We were like, hey, we're flexible. It is what it is. We got something that's coming down the pike where Robbie's going to be able to join us at another time. We'll probably loop in some of the AFCA stuff that we were going to chat with him about tonight when he comes on then. So looking forward to that, but we still got a nice little episode planned for you guys tonight.
We always do. Brian, I noticed you got a few new things in the background there. Got rid of the clock, I see.
I got rid of the clock, got a little VT emblem there, so changing it up a little bit.
Yep.
Courtesy of the in-laws, so shout out in-laws for the Christmas gift.
Shout out in-laws, very nice. The litho finally got hung.
Hey,
the lithograph of Lane Stadium finally got hung.
Where did you shift the other stuff behind there?
All right, so first of all, the Virginia Tech map of Virginia is now directly behind me. The guitar painting is now over here, over next to the guitar. The golf is over there. My wife's already been criticizing me out the way I put everything up, and she's like, it doesn't look right. I'm like, I don't care. I think what's going to happen, I'm going to take a nap one afternoon, and she's going to come in here and rearrange everything, and I really won't care either way, but But we do have we have some things to unload tonight. Kind of our big topic at the end of the evening we're going to be discussing is who are the new alpha dogs for the Hokies. We have a lot of guys, a lot of 5th and 6th year seniors leaving the program after this season, and there's quite a few holes to fill. And, we're going to talk about that after the break. But, Brian, let's go ahead and hit it off of the bat here, and let's talk about the transfer portal because there's been some action with the Hokies over the past roughly week here, and it's not all good news. Let's start with the bad news because, I'm going to be real. It came down Thursday night. Darian Varner had decommitted from the Hokies and committed to the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm still kind of pissed about this one. I don't know about you.
It sounds like the staff was a little heated as well based on everything that was made public on the timeline and from the words of, well, at least a quote from Varner himself. And, I mean, I get it. The situation definitely, you commit. We're almost 3 weeks down the road. Literally about to enroll, and all of a sudden, some new information comes down, and the flip happens, and I mean, you hate to see it. The only thing I'll say is that, you know, we talked about this when we were talking about Varner. Is, you know, he was kind of a tweener.
You did mention that.
Did that impact kind of what we were looking at for him, and did what we were looking at for him impact whether he was still kind of had his eyes out for other opportunities?
It's very true. And you mentioned the tweener that if you didn't say it on here, you said it to me in private that he's going to play. He's going to play the 5, but he's going to play some 3. You said that. You're like, he's going to play 5, which is the technique, you know, end over the tackle, and he's going to play some 3. And the funny thing is, with that, well, I don't want to play on the inside. He's going to, you know, Wisconsin with Fickle, and unless Fickle changes his dynamic, Fickle's always been a 3-man front guy. He's been it since he got to Cincinnati. He's been that forever. Yep. That 3-3-5 stack, and he's guaranteed to play in, but it's effectively the same in. You know what? I don't want to get into it because it gets off again. It more irritates me because of the timing. If the kid was not 100% committed, especially the signing day stuff, where essentially they had to release him because he had signed, right? That's what usually they do not put. If someone does not sign, they do not put their name. They do not go through the ceremony with them just because at pomp and circumstance and somebody backs out or something happens. Not a good look.
And it's nebulous with the portal because the portal, nothing is in ink essentially until you enroll.
Yeah.
So the rules are different, but I think how it was treated as, you know, that official type notation. Obviously, it ended up not being so official.
But it's screwed us even more now.
Well, it screwed us even more because now we were either slowing our search or putting our search on hold for another defensive lineman because we thought we were set. Now we're kind of having to ramp that back up a little more last minute after, you know, some of the pickings have already been, you know, picked through. So that's unfortunate side effect of losing a guy like Varner, who we were both, you know, I think pretty high on. Like I said, think I thought he was at least going to be a guy that production wise could have came in and potentially replace a lot of what Garbett was doing, and we 100%. Saw that with having Payne back, him being able to replace a lot of what Griffin did. It would be almost like you really didn't have any drop off potentially, at least from what you had last year. That isn't necessarily moving us forward into the direction we want to go, but it's at least kind of stopping any sort of bleeding we have on that defensive end position. Now we still got to staunch it a little bit, right?
Yeah, we got to staunch it. We got to find someone, and likely you're having to find. You've got to. It's now going to have to be sped up to a point. What are we now? We got 10 days until it's over, because it started the 6th. 30. We got 10 days. 10 days. Transfer portal 1 is closed, and you're trying to find. My assumption was Varner was the older guy, a couple years of eligibility left, and probably looking for a younger guy as well. They're still having to do that search, and you know, it is what it is. All right, one more piece. If folks didn't see it, I don't think this comes as a shock. Maybe it's a shock of what he did, but not him leaving. Interior offensive lineman Daniel Militek leaves the program, and per the Instagram page he was signing with a semi-pro team in Germany. I mean,
yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. He's still able to play football, getting some scratch from it. You know, hadn't really made his way up the depth chart. Kind of would one step up, one step back, depending on, you know, every time we got a new crop of recruits in, he'd start at the kind of 2 deep and then be 3 deep by the end of the year. Kind of did that a couple years back to back, and now we're kind of, you know, I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall. I'm not going to play any meaningful snaps here. Let's go do what I want to do, get some time, get some coin for it, and
go back home.
Yeah,
essentially go back home and get some coin for it, and you know, best of luck to him and whatever he does. But you know, that again, that helps, that keeps getting that number towards what it needs to be to get the full class in, plus the additional portal commits. And there were two this week, not one, but two. It was kind of being said left and right that we were going to be getting two. Didn't know what to. I don't think I ever heard a name being mentioned from anybody. And if I missed it, I missed it. But the first one, Brian, let's talk about this. In On3's transfer portal rankings, he is the 24 ranked wide receiver. He is from Middle Tennessee, someone we played back in 2021. And, 5'8", 175-pound Jalen Lane. Coolest part about Jalen is the way On3 ranked him. He was a guy who was just barely a 3-star coming out, and now he's borderline 4-star in the transfer portal with On3. And you looked at some of his tape. What are you seeing from him? Where's he going to play? Where can he play? Where do you think he's going to play?
I think in what we're trying to do, and just based on his skill set, his frame, he's going to slot in at the slot. I think he's definitely going to pair well with Felton, with Jennings in the slot for this team, especially as we're moving towards a little bit more of that Moorhead RPO going into this season with drones pulling the trigger. I'm really excited about this group of wideouts because we went into the offseason like, all right, so with Caleb in the portal, we're looking at Lofton with 22 receptions as our big returning wideout this year. And now we've completely flipped that room over. And it's going to be big. And I think the question that it also brings is that with these three guys coming in, are we about to see some wide receiver attrition? Is that going to happen at the back end of window one? Or are we going to wait and see how they play through the spring, and the ones that are ready to jump will do so in that second window? What are your thoughts, man?
Well, my thoughts on that is I think there has to be wide attrition now. And this is more for those guys than it is for the team. If you want to sit there and try to go through spring, it easily could be guaranteed that you are not given a scholarship after spring's done. And you're going to have the lesser time in the portal. But let's look at that room real quick. Oh God, I feel like this room is getting worse than the wide receiver room. 14 total wideouts. 14.
See, we debated this earlier. So he's referring, like, comparing it to the running back room under Fuente.
It was like 9.
Nah, at one point it was 11.
Okay, wait a second. I always thought it was 9. So that's not as bad, I guess. So
at one point it was 11. Now we got 14 wideouts,
14
including
wideouts.
incoming
the incoming freshmen with the portal guys.
Yeah.
So I sit here and say, all right, I think me and you agreed earlier. It's somewhere between 2 or 4 elite. And who do you think the 2 or 4 are? You sit here tonight, if you say these two guys are going, probably just because.
I'd say there's potential for Lofton if he's ready to take another step for maybe a different type of squad. I'd say there's potential for Jalen Jones, potentially Christian Moss. Those three guys played a big role, somewhat of a big role at various parts of the season for us last year. Jones a little bit less so. It was more kind of spot, but Lofton and Moss, obviously Moss early in the year, and then Lofton kind of up and down as the year went along. Are they looking to move on because we've got a fresh batch of wideouts coming in, 2 of which have multiple years of eligibility remaining?
It's true.
I don't know. It depends on if they're settled in their role, if they want to fight to get some more snaps out there in the games against these guys who seem to be until we see other tape, the starting slot X and Z. Yeah. So I think we got those 3 are the guys, unless somebody that was on the roster takes some big steps from last year. So do they take the spring to see if they make those steps and can push those guys, or do they go ahead and try to find their future home now while there are more slots open?
And that's why I lean to say they need to go ahead and get in there. And if you ask me, I think the only two guys who I would want to stay and should stay are probably Lofton and Gosnell. And I say that because we've already seen with Bowen and Fontel is they will rotate. It's not like these with Felton, Jennings, and now Lane coming in. It's not like they're going to be coming in and they're going to get all the snaps. We saw him last year being willing to rotate people in. But where I get more concerned is this is just me thinking right now. I think guys like Jalen Jones, Dallin Wright, Bradshaw. I think Christian Moss less because we kept seeing Christian Moss. We've heard his name mentioned a lot more than the other guys. I mean, I think it's one of those things you pick up and find a home. Because if you sit here and at the end of spring, guys like Aiden Green, Chance Fitzgerald, and Baylor come in and absolutely ball, you're going to have about a 15-day window. Versus now, if you put yourself in the portal with the roughly 10 days left, you're guaranteed your scholarship for the spring, and you can start marketing yourselves and figure out where you're going to be going next, whether it is G5, FCS, D2, JUCOs, in places like that. So
I'll say two things against that. So number one on Bradshaw. I think Bradshaw is our starting slot receiver in 2025.
Okay.
So I don't think he is a guy that is going to transfer, because I think whether Lofton stays or not, we've seen what Lofton can do. And I'm not sure if, like I said, unless we see some significant improvement and fluidity within the system in this spring, I think he's getting leapfrogged by a guy like Bradshaw in the depth chart by the end of next year.
Well, I mean, but see, I'm looking at 2023, and if you tell me, can you depend on Bradshaw or any of those guys for 2023? Lofton didn't blow it up, but at least you know Lofton can play at the level, and you do need some depth. And that's what's got to be figured out in the spring. And I mean, we're going to be getting into that in these upcoming months, which is going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's flip to the other commit, Brian. Another really good player, and that's going to be Derek Canteen out of Georgia Southern. Another guy that if you take a look at, when, he came out, underrated guy, basically mid-70s, so 2-star, and now getting rated. He is one of the top 50 corners in the portal. And he commits, 5'10", 175 pounds. And, you look at his stat lines, and I didn't get to talk about Jalen Lane's stat lines, which you want to go see some, go look at the Miami stat line. He torched them a few times. But his true freshman year, back in COVID year, 6 picks. That's insane.
Yep.
Coming out as a freshman, and obviously won some honors that year. But what's the tape talking about Canteen? And, a little bit of regression, 2021 injured, a little bit of regression this year, but still playing at a good level down at Georgia Southern. But what's the tape telling you?
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple things. So when we talk about the tape, I see him as a very prototypical nickel corner that has some flexibility to play outside.
Okay.
So I think that would be the type of role that he would have for us this year. When we look at the production, obviously great numbers in 2020. When you look at kind of the various metrics that are out there, not as many picks last year. A little bit better when he was called on to rush the passer, got more opportunities to do that as well. The only thing that would concern me is that his tackling got significantly worse in 2022 compared to 2020 when he really kind of was killing it. I think the big thing is as to his success for us is going to be whether that kind of regresses at least to the mean for us this year. If it does, then I think we're okay. I mean, it wasn't egregious fall off, but it was certainly something that kind of turns your eye. And if he can clean any of that up at all, even if he doesn't get back to the levels he was at in 2020, I think we'll be fine.
All right. Do you feel comfortable with the 3-man rotation? And when I say 3-man rotation, do you feel comfortable with Dorian Strong coming off the field and it being only him and Mansour?
Yeah, I think so. You look at the combination of those three kind of being the three primary corners, and then you'll probably work in Cam Johnson and one or two other guys in some sort of occasional rotation, right? But the big three are going to be Strong, Delane, and then Canteen in my mind, based on what we're doing so far, unless somebody takes a big step and jumps one of those guys this offseason, which I don't foresee happening, but we'll see. I feel pretty comfortable. I feel more comfortable with those three going into the season than I felt last year with the three we had. And we had a veteran group last year. We had guys that had played a lot of snaps, but we just didn't have what I would have perceived at the time as being a true alpha starting the season.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see those guys kind of emerge in that room a little bit. So I think there's going to be something to talk about there.
Yeah. And as far as it goes with just the stat line from Canteen, I mean, the guy still had 12 pass deflections as a corner. So he may have not gotten the ball as many times. He still had quite a few pass deflections. So we'll see. Again, I think that room is now pretty solid. You said it. There may be no one from the current roster that can take that big step. But I just think we want to see good gains from guys like Cam Johnson to be able to supplement the three starters in that case. All right, let's take our mind off football, unfortunately, for a few minutes.
Cover your eyes. Cover your eyes, guys.
Let's talk a little bit about hoops, Brian. You know, Hokies currently on a 4-game losing streak that goes back to the BC game that unfortunately kicked off the state of the program address.
Jeremy decided to black out because of that game.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only reason, nothing else. But we're talking
peer pressure.
We're talking about losses now to Wake Forest by 2 points, to Clemson by 3 points, and the comeback comes up short versus NC State by 4 points. And this team, which was rolling going into December, is now absolutely reeling. And tough trip tomorrow night to the Carrier Dome. But just those games. I mean, I didn't get to see any of the state game. I was out with my wonderful wife and enjoying this unbelievable burger at Red Salt here in Richmond that was really damn good. And as we leave, I look at the phone, and you and Robbie and Jason have blown me up about how the game, like, what the but
yeah, that one wasn't pretty to watch. It really wasn't. It wasn't pretty to watch. And we've kind of seen that. I think we're struggling to put consistent offense out there, which is not something I thought we'd be talking about. We knew that the defense was probably going to take a hit this year. We thought that the offense was going to be good enough to compensate, but we're a team right now that needs 3-point shooting to win, and we're not hitting threes at the clip we need to. When we look at the percentage that we're shooting threes, it's much poorer than last year on a team that in theory should be hitting more because there are more shooters on the floor.
There are significantly better shooters on the floor. I mean, we're under 35% now from three. And if let's go back, what did I say about 5 weeks ago? Like, we can't live like that. We were going to lose games because of that. And here in behold, we're losing games.
And we showed earlier in the year that we could grind out wins even when we weren't hitting. But you take a guy that plays defense like Couture off the floor, and that's the difference between grinding out a narrow win and the losing streak that we're on right now. Yep. And again, you look at it and say, okay, well, some of this is fixable. Some of this is fixable. You get Couture back. You get Rice back, who is has a hair trigger at the 3-point line. We'll see if he can be a boost to this team. But I think the big thing that getting Couture and getting Rice back that's going to do, it's going to give you some more lineup flexibility to where if one or two guys are cold, there's a little more flexibility to rotate guys in that can maybe kind of give the team a spark when the offense just isn't quite clicking like it needs to. Because right now, without Rice and without Couture, there's really no one to kind of bring in from an offensive standpoint that can give you that start.
I mean, no disrespect to Kidd or Collins, but the offensive standpoint, they're good bodies on defense, get you a few points there. Them or Poteet kind of done that all year, but. Let's talk about Rodney.
And Kidd had one of his better games, this last outing, but it was still, it's not gonna be. You're not gonna get that from him every night.
Oh, exactly. I mean, again, we've been talking about them coming off the bench and what it's been. They've been given about 14, 15. Somebody will get close to 10. The others will, drop in a couple points here or there. But let's go back to Rodney Rice real quick because. Monday press conference, Mike Young says he has been given the okay to play Wednesday, which we found out, in the press conference after the loss, right?
Yep.
It not being cleared, which I think, I understand why you don't say that leading up because, why let teams prepare for you a different way if you're not doing that? And
he had to know that this announcement that he is cleared was coming soon when he divulged the information that he hasn't been cleared.
Yeah.
So he had to know that he was maybe at most one game away from getting that clearance. Exactly. And I get, Mike Young mind games. I get that. But, at the same time, I think from a fan perspective, it was kind of frustrating to watch a guy warm up, dress, and then sit. Warm up, dress, like rinse and repeat for almost a month now. It gets a little tedious. I think on the fans.
A little bit crazy.
Yeah, and then it mattered. I think a little bit less before the Couture injury, but I think everyone was hoping for a lift. When we found out Couture was going to be out for at least a handful of games, and seeing a guy that was dressing and warming up, and then was a scratch. It was a little bit frustrating, and then when the losses start coming along with that, I think everybody was getting a little frustrated with the situation. So now it's nice to kind of be able to move past that element of it, and we can focus on, all right, so what can Rodney Rice do for us, and we'll get to find out that pretty soon.
We will get to find out on again tomorrow night at 7:00 on the ACC network.
It's actually on the ACC network.
It's actually on the ACC network, not RSC.
God bless.
So there's more things we can. I'd actually go drink on that just because it's so annoying. All right, let's flip real quick. Just talk about the ladies real quick, which they're going through some ups and downs after that Notre Dame game. They get upset at Clemson. They beat ranked UNC, handle UVA without Kitley. UVA, who had only had one loss up to that point. Then they get Kitley back, and they go down and lose to Miami. Louisville coming up Thursday. They're still ranked, probably still safely in the tournament the way they've been playing. But, God, what is it about January and Hokies basketball where it's just like it's a freaking roller coaster of
yeah, I mean, and these are the Clemson especially was a game that they should have taken care of.
Let me put this. Thanks, Clark.
Oh no!
Why does it say ACC Network on the Hokie Sports page? Could they make that change just so I can be?
I think it's all the blackout rules and stuff. Like technically, if you're certain places, it can be on the ACC Network, but.
Well, no. It says it right here. It's in. They make it a smaller print. Appreciate it, Clark, for that. But can the ladies get back on track of what they were doing earlier this season? Over the next few weeks, they got Louisville, and then you're looking at Pitt. You're looking at Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia again. It's not like until they get to Wake Forest, until they get to state, it's not like they're going through a gauntlet of big teams.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of move forward here. I think that just talent wise, they're going to circle the wagons here.
They should.
But it's been a frustrating start to January so far, 10 days in.
Well, frustrating even more is, we look at wrestling, which was, got some coverage. Again, I thought that would be on the ACC network on Friday night versus Cornell. It's essentially a top 10 wrestling matchup with, two programs that send players to, the nationals. Instead, that's a 30 for 30, and this is on ACC Extra. I swear, whoever does the programming for hire me. Give me 7 figures. I can get you figured out real quick because they're a bunch of idiots. Yeah,
I'll do it for 6.
You'll do it for 6.
I'll undercut you. I'll undercut you.
Just hire me as a consultant. But they go out west and have a couple good matches at Stanford, who has a couple good guys looking, but they beat them. They handle another smaller school out there, and then they come back for the Cornell. And I know there's some younger guys on it. I couldn't tell you everything about wrestling. I'd shout out my fraternity brother, David Fuqua, who pays probably more attention to it and could tell more. Maybe we'll have him on one day. But it was a rough loss, but they backed it up a couple days later by wiping the floor with American and Mason. And I just don't know enough about wrestling, honestly. I know someone's that – was it JJ? Who was it that said they were at the match and – one of the matches, it seems our guy was wiping the floor, but the other guy won like 3-2.
Yeah, I think that was JJ.
Okay.
I wasn't able to watch, so unfortunately, I don't have a lot of insight onto kind of what was going down. I saw Sam with the big
Sam had a big win.
W there, so that was great for him, but definitely uneven for from top to bottom. So. Hopefully, we can see them move on from that. They've already done a good job with that so far. So I think they'll keep the train moving here.
Still ranked, still going to send some guys to nationals. You got 2 at the end of the month, which will be on the ACC network, and that's NC State and Pitt, 2 of the other powers in wrestling. Again, that will be on ACC network. I don't know how that one did, but this one didn't. But, what do I know? All right, just a couple more notes before we hit the break here, Brian. I don't know if you read this or you know about the man, but Charlie Breaker was announced that he is going to be succeeding Mark Emmert as the NCAA president. Thoughts?
No, because it's the NCAA. And we'll see if a leadership change knocks some sense into that organization, but I don't see it happening. This is still an organization that is nothing but a reactionary money machine and has zero interest in actually governing the sport of football specifically. They're pretty awful across the board, but in terms of the money makers for them, they are awful at governing the sport. And I foresee a time when they're going to be made obsolete.
All right. Well, I think the move for Baker is this. Baker is a good politician, and he's a good policy maker. And I say he's a good politician. He's a Republican that won in Massachusetts the governorship not once but twice, which is pretty damn impressive in my opinion. But the question is, has there been so much damage done by Emmert's regime? Even if you take a strong person to come in there and maybe straighten things out, like they're not going to be able to do it. Because they're so far behind. I would hope not. I would hope there is a chance and someone new comes in and can straighten it out. But I'm much like you. I'm holding my breath until I actually see something done. You just can't foresee it.
I need to see a full flip of a lot of things before I get anywhere on board with what they're trying to do.
All right. There's Brian's statement. All right, one last piece, Brian. Let's see your feelings on this. There has been a committee out there, the NCAA Transformation Committee that is recommending that March Madness expand to 90 teams.
Boo.
No. God, no.
Boo. No.
I mean, it's just like, are you bleeping kidding me? Like, 64 was perfect. And then you put 68. 68's okay.
68's fine.
Fine.
I've got no big qualms with it. I think we've seen a couple kind of come out of that those early rounds and make a little noise. So I mean, there's some legitimacy put behind it at this point.
But you're gonna have 32 more teams on top.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you said, okay, will we go from 68 to 72? I'll have a discussion about that. But I mean, adding 30? No.
Well, then it's the logistical point, right? Like, when are you going to do this? Like, are you literally going to like announce teams? Hey, you're in the play-in tournament. You're going to go here on Monday, and then you're going to play a game every day this week. I think it's dumb. I think the tournament is what it is, but clearly, you can tell it's an organization trying to make more money. While ruining one of the more perfect products out there. So if it goes to 90, it's like you got to stop it somewhere. You got to stop it somewhere. And you're at this really good number that keeps so many people not working on Thursday and Friday of the first weekend in March. Stop.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. All right, y'all, before, guys, we get into some more topics tonight, we are going to take a quick pause from our digital partners.
As we take a quick break, we'd like to tell you about getting your free website report from our digital partner, Grassroots Digital Marketing Studio. They'll tell you how your website ranks on Google, on-site SEO, and social media. No commitment to buy anything. You can get your free report by visiting grassrootsdigitalstudio.com/free-website-report. Now back to the episode.
All right, Brian. So first note, let's hit this real quick because this was awesome to see released yesterday. Corey Moore is officially a College Football Hall of Famer.
It's about damn time.
We had talked about this when he was on the ballot. Was it August when they kind of released the final ballot? And it was like we went over his accolades. It's like you cannot keep him out. What he did in 98 and 99, two-time Big East Player of the Year, Lombardi Award winner Nagurski. Also, what has been surfacing, and I know Clark put it out there, maybe as much as you love Marshawn's, I put Corey's one as far as best interviews with the press of all time.
I mean, it's 1A and 1B, and if you put them in either order, I'll sign off on it. All-time great, like, big, like, metaphorical and literal middle finger to the media as we're kind of working through there. Except Randy. Randy got the love. Randy got the love.
But just in general, I mean, the man who coined the tear-down phrase in 99 versus Clemson, that game, crazy eyes, just a barbarian on the field. Literally
I love how he was, like, already in intense mode for that interview. Like, he had the same eyes as he did when he said "Welcome to the Terradome, baby."
Same eyes.
I loved it.
It's great that he gets there, and another Hokie in the Hall of Fame, which is awesome. All right, Brian, let's flip and let's talk a little bit about the games over the last few weeks that we did not talk about. Was that not the best semifinals for a New Year's Eve, man? Having drinks, eating some good food. I mean, you couldn't ask for more of those two games.
Yeah, I mean, they gave us everything we could have wanted. There was scoring. There was good plays on defense. It was the exact balance between scoring and defense, I think, in terms of creating a good college football game. Everything kind of came down to the end in both.
It did.
I mean, that's exactly what you want.
It is, man. And, let's talk about the last game first, the Ohio State-Georgia game. I mean, it showed you that it was an elite slugfest.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think if Marvin Harrison Jr. does not get knocked out of that game, I don't think they stop him. I think that last field goal's a touchdown, and I think they drive it again. That's my
Yeah.
opinion on that.
Yeah. And I mean, you had Kirby Smart with the most important timeout in Georgia football history on the fake punt.
Oh my God! And I think they never showed it. I think they gave it to him. I don't think he got there before they snapped that ball because that whistle went off almost simultaneously.
It was very close.
I mean,
it was very close.
Super close. And again, that's a pretty big change. But they hang on to win, and we'll talk about what happened last night in a minute. But the first game, this is where that whole getting prepared can always help a team with lesser talent because TCU is lesser talented than Michigan up and down the roster. But you saw they had that perfect game plan, especially defensively. They had JJ's out routes pegged. And basically the defensive coordinator basically said, you see that run, just go. Run to it, run through it. Because they didn't get one, they got two on the exact same route.
Yep. And Michigan was too slow to kind of pivot off of that or call some counters off of that to kind of keep them on edge. They were too slow to do it. And that ended up biting them in the ass. I mean, they kind of put things together late, but
Not late
a lot of the damage had already been done. And TCU did a good job of capitalizing on every mistake Michigan made.
Every mistake. Multiple turns? The 2 pick sixes, the fumble at the goal line. Michigan finally got karma to bite them in the arse 11 years later. They deserved it. It would have been in New Orleans. It would have been even sweeter, But, you mentioned as we were talking through this, text change and stuff, was basically TCU played the A-plus game. They played their perfect game offensively and defensively, and even offensively with some turnovers. And Michigan played the B game. And in that case, even with that talent disparity, taking advantage, playing your games, they won. Now, let's flip to last night. That was an A-plus game by Georgia.
Yeah. Georgia had the perfect game plan, and they were hyped up. And I'll say this too: there is no one that is selling the underhype better than Kirby Smart.
Oh my God!
Because how many of those players saying they thought we were going to be a 7-win team this year or 8-win team this year? No one said that. but he had them believing that they had been written off as any sort of contender for the college football playoff. And it showed. They played, especially last night, like it was the last game they'd ever play.
They did. They played A+, and then TCU borderline brought an F game. There was no creativity. They didn't pivot off anything. You said it earlier, they looked shell-shocked.
Yeah.
In that game.
They looked shook, like right out the gate. They didn't look like they almost got punched in the mouth. They knew what they had come to the table with wasn't going to work. And they just kind of looked lost. And I thought there was going to be a little something when they had the busted coverage, got them the big play, got down there, got the touchdown. I was like, all right, well, we got maybe a game here. And then Georgia right down the field to another touchdown. And then, what's it from there? 28 straight points before half. After that touchdown. And you could tell they were pressing. I mean, you went from 31 to 38 because you're pressing so hard to score because you got to get something to go into half to feel like any sort of momentum. And then you kind of it goes the other way and they get another touchdown to close out the half. So it was just a comedy of errors and a comedy of just really not looking like a team that knew what to do once once their game plan was kind of in the trash.
Yep. And you know the other piece is this is where you talk about talent. This is the game you saw that the talent disparity was on display. But it was also the time to prepare. This was a normal game week. Those
More or
teams
less, yeah,
finished-
more or less.
They finished playing Saturday night. They probably flew back home Sunday, probably rested Sunday, started normal prep on Monday. And with something like that, when you have that big a talent disparity, you can't find the little niches. You can't find, let's fake something. Let's do this. Let's do this. They went in there and they essentially tried to stand up and fight Georgia versus, let's get tricky, like unload the bag. You can't do that. You can't do that with the talent disparity. It sucked even more that their best running back, gets hurt in Michigan, the Michigan game at the Fiesta Bowl, and he's out. But I think what we saw between those games, the USC Tulane game, and other games is it's going to be the reason 12 works, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be the reason 12 works because your elite teams are going to be waiting up here, and there could be a non-elite conference champion team, but with them having 3 to 4 weeks to prepare for whomever, right? So like Kansas State, Kansas State's going to have to play a team they can destroy them. Well, if they have a month to prepare to get healed and then to open up their bag of tricks, they might pull it. I know Mike McDaniel, our buddy over at SI, and our buddy has been on us many times, Hokie himself. Do you see a change in who's winning the national title the next 10 years? No. But I think
not in the short term. You're going to see, unless there's big coaching changes at the places that we see right now, those that are rolling are going to keep rolling.
100%. 100%. But again, it's that over the time frame. But I also think you're going to have some Cinderella stories. And, occasionally Cinderella can win.
Occasionally, and I think where you're going to see it most, and I said, you might have a pre-crowned champion get knocked off in the first or second round or something like that, and then that results in a team that shouldn't be there at least being there. Even if they don't win it all, they'll at least be there.
Again, it's hope. I keep saying it. This is a sport built on hope.
Yep.
And if for years there was no hope, then there was a glimmer of hope, then there was a little more of a glimmer of hope. There was a big glimmer of hope for everybody out there that, aren't your top 5 to 7 teams. All right, Brian, something we talked about earlier and kind of what we're looking at this episode. Who are going to be the new alpha dogs for the Hokies? We look around and there's some old alphas out of the door. We look at you got Silas Danzy, who was, Joe Rudolph told us on here back in October, he had really become the leader of that line. Got Caleb Smith, who was leading the wide receiver room this year, who went to Notre Dame. You got a guy like Tywan Garbett, who was maybe not the most vocal leader on the defensive line, but he definitely was on the field the leader because he had some of the best plays.
Led by example, took care of business, left it all out there for sure.
And a couple more guys, and these are obvious ones in Dax and Chamari, right?
Yep. And those are guys, a lot of those names that we've talked about, for years. I mean, Dax has really kind of been a leader in his room almost since he first arrived on campus, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's been at least one of the alphas in that room, if not the guy. So it's kind of it's we haven't really had, at least from a linebacker perspective, this big of a vacuum at the position in a long time. And similar with Chamari there, I think there hasn't really been a guy in about 2 or 3 years that has kind of been on that same level. So we're going to see some interesting guys stepping into new roles, a lot more leadership from guys that we haven't seen leadership from. And we're going to kind of assess that and see who we think those guys might be this year, who's going to step up and kind of take on those roles as we roll into 2023.
Absolutely. So let's start it. Let's start it. Obviously, this is an offensive lineman podcast. We're going to start right there. And Brian, who is the leader? Because it's not like anybody was standing out completely on the offensive line this year. So, I'm gonna kind of pivot and let you take this, because what are you seeing? Who do you think could be the leader of this offensive line going into 2023?
I'm thinking just right off the bat in terms of guy that's done it pretty well at a pretty decent level so far. Caden Moore, I think, is going to step into that role for the Hokies in 2023. 2-year starter now. Has done some really good things. I think took some steps from a leadership perspective a little bit this year. We'll see if in an expanded capacity, if that is something that he kind of grows into heading into 2023. But I feel like he is the guy in terms of ability and production. He's got the bona fides to step into that role. Whether he can handle that from a vocal standpoint, I'm not sure about. But I think that's something that we'll find out, because I feel like he's going to be the guy to kind of take over that for the offensive line as we head into 2023 spring practice.
All right. Let me ask this. We saw him on the line. He's a grinder, not the most athletically gifted guy, but there's been sort of the buzz that Jesse Hansen may go to center. I mean, I think we know that should happen because of how Braylon Moore played at left guard last year. But if he gets to the center position, with basically working his way into a starting slot, starting every game this year at left guard, if he plays center, could he be the person that takes the reins?
Well, number one, it's going to depend on if that's the move he makes, if he wins that job. I think if we don't bring anybody else in, he's going to win that job if he moves to center. Center's a little bit less demanding from a physical standpoint, which has always been probably his weakest trait. I don't know if he can handle some of the mental side of it, but if he picks that up well enough, I think that, a lot of times you do look to your center as kind of being a leader. He's the guy making the calls. He's the guy kind of setting things up for the offense as a whole. You want your center to at least be somebody when they bark, you listen, because that's going to have to be what happens a lot. Whether that guy is the true alpha in the room or not can be, debatable. But you always want your center to be a guy that has some level of vocal leadership in the room.
All right, good deal. And the way things are heading, and we got 10 days, so maybe it changes. If they go out and they find a portal lineman that has some accolades, that has some cachet, from your experience, can someone walk in off the street that had not been in that room and take a leadership role?
If we're talking about by the time fall rolls around, maybe. If we're talking about between now and spring, definitely not.
Okay.
But if we want to have a guy that can be some sort of leader, then he definitely needs to be on campus in the next 10 days.
Okay.
That's not going to be a second window thing. If you're looking for the leadership aspect, then they need to be on campus in the spring.
Got it. So obviously, let's take let's hold tight and see what happens the next 10 days. But I'm going to go back. I think I'm with you. I think Caden Moore's the guy. And I think he's got to take that role. And it was more because as you were watching the tape last year, right, Brian, did he have his mistakes? Yes. But was he probably the most consistent guy on the line, in your opinion?
I'd say he was the most balanced in terms of being successful in the run game and the passing game. In terms of pass pro and run blocking, he was the most consistent week in, week out. He didn't necessarily have those elite games, but he also didn't bottom out like some of the other players did. And even some of the players in the leadership role had a game here where you would say they would have bottomed out. So I would go with Caden Moore as being kind of that steady Eddie. And like I said, with 2 years of experience starting, he's going to be kind of the elder statesman in terms of career snaps heading into the season as well.
Got it. All right. So next room, let's look at wide receivers. And this is one we agreed on real quick because of a lot of different variables, and that's Ollie Jennings, even though he is a portal guy. He's done it, right?
Yep.
His 2 years at ODU, he has been putting up numbers. He puts up numbers on everybody, whether it's a G5, an FCS, or the team he's now playing for, because he lit us up last year for over 100 yards. And that's
with his quarterback having no time and an inability to get the ball, even drive the ball downfield most of the time. So,
at all,
yeah,
at all. But the bigger thing, as me and Brian were going through this exercise, is it's that relationship with Fontel Mines, because I think from the guy that recruited him at several places, got him to ODU, coached him at ODU. He knows what Fontel wants. And Brian, sometimes that can be the biggest leader. If it's the guy who is preaching the coach's message the best and has the respect of everybody, that's an easy transition.
Yeah, and Jennings is definitely that guy. It's going to be a pretty easy transition to the locker room. He's a Virginia guy, so I think that's easily going to resonate with a lot of the guys in the locker room as well. And again, he's a guy that has the bona fides to back up what he's saying on the field. So when he barks, I think those guys will listen.
Yep. Now the thing is with this though, Ali is just a 1-year guy. So with bringing the guys in like Lane and Felton and some of the younger bucks, take a look at, we're going to be kind of in the same spot again last year. But the better part about this is you kind of get to see who's second in command. I mean, it's one of those weird things when you hear who Ali's living with, who's around him a lot, when we know we'll see it, when we see David Cunningham and some of the other guys, videos during some of the practices, who is his lieutenant?
Yep.
Because whoever the lieutenant is, whoever's with him a lot, that's probably going to be your dog next year.
It was like when Isaiah moved on, we knew Cam was going to be that guy.
He was his lieutenant. They were friends. You could tell. I think they lived together even. So, it's one of those things where it all made sense. And I think that's kind of what to look for going in the future. All right. Defensive line. Because this is where me and you had a long conversation. I feel like we talked about 25 minutes on it, because I said – and it was kind of with the offensive line too, but with the defensive line, you've got sort of two groups, right? You've got your edge and you've got your interior linemen. And how do you decide who becomes the leader out of those, or is it sort of subsets?
And I was talking to you, I said there's probably going to be a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
So I gave the example of, if I had a guy, if I play guard, and I needed to approach a leader about technique or concept of a play or anything like that, I was going to probably talk to the guy that was ahead of me, or a guy that had been there for a while at my position. Whereas the overall leader of the unit might be somebody different. I'm going to shout out Lee Bailey here from Hampton City 2003 All-American center. He was the guy that if he barked, you'd listen. But if I needed to know something about guard play, I was going to Chad Kopp. So it's kind of one of those scenarios where, depending on the circumstance, your leader might look a little different depending on the circumstance. But you're going to have kind of that overarching force on that unit. And when we look at that, could that be one of the D tackles that's played a lot of snaps at this point, like a Pollard, a Fuga, a Kendricks? Could it be?
We know Pollard's one of the most vocal guys in that room.
Big vocal guy. So, I mean, if you're looking at overarching leader from a vocal standpoint, you can see him emerge. If we're looking at DNs, I mean, Fladarius Payne hasn't played any snaps for us, but he's been on the roster now for over a year or almost a year at this point. So, is that somebody that could move into a leadership role from a DN perspective? We probably lost the biggest this year, and probably the de facto number 2 also.
Yeah.
With Griffin's eligibility expiring as well. So, who does the DN room look to? I mean, Varner gone definitely leaves some questions. I think Varner, if he'd have came in, could have potentially been a guy that could have stepped into some type of role like that. But Wisconsin has him now, so we got to look to the future. I don't think anybody else that you bring in the portal, whether somebody gets into the next 10 days or they come in after spring, I don't think anybody else at this point would have the cachet to step into the locker room and be that for this unit. So we're looking at guys on the roster right now. So I think probably your D tackle room is going to be
leading the group,
the best place to look for a leader for that unit this year.
Right. I mean, and that makes sense. And again, we had discussed actually before Varner decommitted, it was, I think the way we had it written down here, Varner could lead the room just because he was an all AAC performer. He had some credentials, right?
Yep.
I've played well. And with him stepping out, it kind of leaves a void right there. So the question is, on that end, is it Payne? Can one of the younger guys step up? And to your point, we've got 10 days. Is there someone they can bring in from the portal that just clicks? And we can hope, right? We can hope. All right, let's go to a couple more rooms. The linebacker room. I think this one is sort of that twofold, right? What we talked about with the wide receiver room. Because I think right now, Brian, without a shadow of a doubt, Alan Tisdale is going to be the leader of that unit.
The question is he going to be the leader of that unit from the Mike linebacker position?
I keep saying I think he is. I think he's going to play. I mean, no one else popped. No disrespect. Jaden Keller looked good at times, but he's still a couple years away. Unless he takes a massive step this spring, but you feel like Tisdale probably knows the defense. He's shown some growth in the last year with everything that happened with the gambling thing, and then not whining, not pouting, going in there, working scout team to keep himself in shape. And then
Curtis has a theory about what he was doing on scout team.
My theory is he played Mike. My theory is he played Mike on scout team. Why wouldn't you want the most veteran guy out there being the Mike on the scout team defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right there. I like Tisdale as far as this unit's leadership. I think there's a lot of young potential in this unit, but there is no one else that has the snap count, the experience, the cachet as Tisdale. So I think he kind of steps into that role, at least for 2023.
Now, you made the point, too, about Tisdale is Tisdale's not had the get up here, ride it career. Tisdale has had a freaking roller coaster of a career, which when me and you were talking, you said that might be a great thing for this young room is the guy who hasn't had the perfect time.
Yeah, he's not Captain America out there. He's not a guy that's like always been on the right track or always did the right thing or this, that, and the other. He's a guy that, didn't always do the right thing or didn't always work as hard as he needed to or things like that. But now, he's turned it around. He's doing the right thing. He's getting it done. I think he showed so much last year, especially once he was cleared to play. I think that he's ready to kind of step into that type of role for this defense.
Absolutely. Now, Brian, when me and you started talking about this, though, you mentioned a name that you said how he looked those last 3 games, and if he takes that step this year, he's going to be barking you orders for a couple years.
Yeah, give me Kelly Lawson here. I think he could really step into that kind of 1B leadership role, that lieutenant, heading into this year. Took a big step after switching positions and switching sides of the ball. Like there was a lot of things that were in flux for him, and as the season went on, he really kind of grew into that role. And I think you've seen him. He's been vocal on the field, vocal on the sideline. He plays with his heart on his sleeve a lot, and I think people could rally around that. So, that's going to be a guy to keep your eye on. If he can kind of put all the other pieces together, long term, I think we got a leader in Lawson.
And a leader that can absolutely ball and is a freak. So
Yep.
awesome. Well, one more room to hit, Brian. We're going to look at the defensive back room. We're going to look at that together, kind of like looking at the defensive line room. And, I mean, everything is on the table for the overall group leader, very, very likely to be Dorian Strong come springtime.
Yep. And I will caveat that with in that room, you could potentially see if Delane comes on more. He's still very young, but I think the season that he put out last year, especially how much he came on once he got an opportunity, people are definitely going to look to him as one of those guys in the locker room. But I think it's Strong initially just because he does have, again, 2 years under his belt as a full-time starter. And he's a guy that I think can really kind of keep the unit together and kind of work through the things when they need to work through them and to get better as the season goes along. So I'm looking at Strong as being that guy out the gate, especially in the spring, because I think he's just the guy that they're going to look to as the true veteran on that unit.
Yep. I mean, 3 years playing and everything. Now, we mentioned it earlier, Chamari Connor. Chamari Connor, effectively like Dax, probably since 2019, led the safety room. And let's be for real, I think the way it's shaping up, I mean, I like Nasir Peoples and everything, but the way Strowman played last year, the name, the caveat, Big Bro got a pick, by the way. You see that? You see Big Bro pick?
I saw it. I saw it, man.
Good for Greg. But I think Jalen Strowman, he will definitely lead the safety group this year. I don't think there's a doubt in that. You see him, you just like it's that feel. It's kind of like the way Greg was. Greg was a de facto leader of the D block. So, I mean, do you see anybody else potentially trying to taking that from him, or do you think that's his?
I think it's kind of going to be Strowman and Peoples 1A, 1B. And I think you might see the spring Peoples have it, and then Strowman kind of takes it over as we get to the fall. And that's okay. That kind of stuff happens. I mean, but you'll see it when it happens, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where you kind of see leaders emerge if your eyes are open and you're watching what's happening. So, but I think that's something where if Strowman doesn't emerge out of the gate in the offseason, I think you'll see him kind of take that mantle as he starts making some of those big plays in the big games. And I think people start turning to him as being kind of the guy, kind of the juice for that room.
100%. So, there's some position groups we didn't mention in here, obviously. And, obviously the most standout is just quarterback. Just because you can't call a leader at that yet, because there is going to be a competition. The competition is going to start in just a couple weeks here with winter workouts. So we didn't mention that one.
Drones.
Well, gotta be a competition. I'm not saying
drones.
All right, and then we did mention running back room or the tight end room. Gallo's definitely still the leader of the tight end room, even as good as Daquan Wright played. And the running back room, to me, it's still Malachi, because when Malachi played, the offense looked significantly better last year.
King has had the bigger plays. Malachi just seems to have just the better fit for down by down. Yeah. If that makes sense. And I think that actually helps King, because when King can be a change of pace, you're going to see him break those big plays more consistently.
Yeah. But again, I go back to think about when Malachi King, it was Miami, right? No, not Miami. I always lose. Give me a moment here. This is why I keep certain pages up. But I felt like when Malachi came in, it's like the offense was starting to take shape until he got hurt. Right?
Malachi had some big plays here or there that kept the offense on the field when it otherwise should have been off the field.
Exactly. Exactly. And I
So
think
he's the guy that kind of made up for some of the deficiencies that this offense had last year in spots. And I think that'll open up even more. Yeah. And that'll open up even more with more RPO this year, with less of a focus on the ground and pound play action, and a little more on getting that defensive line in conflict as to whether it's run or pass. So the more we lean on that, the easier it's going to be for these running backs and Malachi to really kind of get into games and take over games.
And the reason I still say Malachi played in 3 games this year. He got hurt in the state game. He had almost 250 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns in basically 2.5 quarters.
And if we saw in the state game, when he went down, the juice went out of the offense in that game.
Did. Yes, it did. All right. Real quick, just a message here. Coach Compton not able to make it tonight. He will be on with us soon. Definitely going to talk about the AFCA conference that he attended in. Maybe looking at a few other things with some schematics with Big Guy there. One other thing, Brian, not trying to be political on this show, but he is a Hokie. He is a Hokie we grew up with. Watching him play in that safety position. Aaron Rouse got elected to the Virginia State Senate tonight, so a big congrats to him. Good for
down
Aaron.
in Virginia Beach, 7th District.
7th District down at the beach, so good for him. Anything else breaking? This is not the time of year anything's breaking. Anybody losing? I mean, it's
not a lot of breaking, at least Hokie related, because there's nothing really.
Yeah,
nothing really shaking tonight.
We're waiting here. We're waiting. But if there is nothing left, Brian, let's wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner podcast, brought to you by Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg, Virginia. I am Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Visit our website, boundarycornervt.com, to listen to all of our episodes. Again, those who did not listen to the state of the program episode, go back and listen to it.
You missed a banger. It went off the rails a little bit at the end, but it was a banger.
Well, again, but it was also really good points made. We made
and I let Tally know that he was making good points a whole lot.
Yeah, there is a certain segment where Brian probably forgot his own name, is when you hear him agreeing with Tally a lot loudly. Right there. We pinpointed it. We found
in the second half of the episode, you could play a drinking game just on the number of times I said, I'm right there with you, Tally. If you took a shot every time you did that,
you'd have been wrecked.
You'd be as drunk as I was.
LeVar, we appreciate it, man. We appreciate all y'all hanging out with us tonight. We got quite a few. Yes, it was hilarious. LeVar approves. But while you're there, follow us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go to our YouTube, which is continuing to grow more and more. We appreciate that out there, y'all. As always, we let our buddy Jason Long play us out. Check him out on his website, jasonlongmusic.com. I'm sure he's going to probably be having some dates somewhere in the near future where he's going to be playing. Link to all of his music on Apple, Spotify. Also, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, where you can find our podcast as well. Also, check out Jason's YouTube and Facebook pages. We thank you for listening. And as always, let's go.
Hokie!
Each day I wonder all across the lonely ground. Don't fit in me, for must admit, I've seen